on already. Good morning, everybody. You're very welcome this morning to AIT. The weather is not so good. We hope to have numbers, but we need to get started because we have a very, very full schedule, which I'm sure you'll all enjoy and appreciate if we can run it to time. Very quickly, householding, just make sure you know where the emergency exits are. There's 2 up there at the back, and there's 2 here at the front. I feel like the air hostess, 2 here and 2 at the back. But safety is all important to us at every time. The conference theme is our evolving learning landscape. And just to put it in context of the world that we live in, before I have the conference officially opened, some of you might recognize this. It's a Motorola phone. We nicknamed it the Brick. It's kind of delicate up here, but can you imagine carrying that around and all you can do with it is make a phone call? This is my mobile phone. Virtually a computer in my hand, and we know they come a lot smaller than that. Has the landscape evolved? Our life's landscape has evolved. Today we're looking at our evolving educational landscape. We are here in AIT, and Dr. Neil Seary is going to open our conference for us. A man who is very, very interested and committed to the whole area of education design and research, pedagogy, and also very committed to an organization called TARG, which I'm sure he may mention himself. So without further ado, I'd like to invite, I think I said Neil, but it should be Niall, shouldn't it? Yeah, Dr. Niall Seary to open our conference. Thank you.
Chair, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, delegates and colleagues, I'm delighted to welcome you to the 47th annual conference for the Computers in Education Society. And as the Chair has mentioned, I think that there is much credit to go to the organising committee for this conference, but in particular the theme of the conference this year, our evolving learning landscape. I'm not sure in the history of education have we seen the amount of change that we have seen in the last number of years and going to see in the next number of years. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you here to Athlone Institute of Technology. I'm deputising on behalf of the President, who unfortunately couldn't make it this morning. He's out of the country. But again, he sends his regards and his welcome to all of the delegates here today. For those of you who don't know Athlone Institute of Technology, we pride ourselves on being a contemporary third-level institution distinguished by academic excellence in teaching, learning and research. Athlone Institute of Technology this year was awarded the Sunday Times Institute of Technology of the Year. We previously won it in 2018, and we were runners-up in 2017, an achievement that we are very, very proud of here. We are also we top Ireland's official league tables for research in the sector, and quite recently we started benchmarking internationally. And in the international benchmark of U Multi-Rank, we are in the top 25 universities in the world in interdisciplinary research in both 2018 and 2019. But more importantly for us as an institute of technology and an educational leader in the Midlands, we've been ranked #1 nationally for student satisfaction consistently now for the past 6 years. And that's something that we really pride ourselves on. Your conference today looks quite exciting. I'm really excited about the evolving practices in education that are being driven by this society. And when I was looking through the conference proceedings, I was looking at areas like robotics to enhance creativity in STEAM classrooms, digital badging for post-primary education, and a connected and flipped classroom. All agendas that are topical not only at primary, post-primary, but also in higher education. And I've no doubt that today's schedule will stimulate and drive a lot of future innovation in terms of education and computing in education. Technology has been gradually transforming the education landscape over the past decade in particular. And I think the onset and the introduction of computer science as a Leaving Cert subject establishes the importance of this capability in this area of study in general education and is to be welcomed. And I'd say much credit goes to this organisation for driving that agenda. In March of last year, Minister McHugh announced a further €50 million investment in ICT infrastructure for all primary and post-primary schools under the Project Ireland 2040 initiative, which takes the total spend for the digital strategy for schools' ITC infrastructure fund now to €110 million. What was interesting at the launch, Minister McHugh noted that we are living in a time which has been fundamentally transformed by digital technologies, disruptive technologies in cloud, and mobile and social technologies that are now revolutionizing not only the way that we work, but also the very fundamental way that we live. Critical creative thinking, problem-solving skills, and adaptability will be key to ensuring that our young people flourish in this environment, and we need to make sure that they are well prepared. Indeed, within AIT, our own strategic plan 2019 to 2023 has positioned us in a very much a transitional mode as we work towards technological university status. And we have committed very much to the digital innovations, ensuring that our infrastructure offers students and staff more access capabilities and flexibilities to allow us to deliver a better student experience. We too are investing in a campus master plan, ensuring that we are future-proofing the needs of students for tomorrow through planned initiatives such as bring your own device, virtual labs, and in actual fact, we are expanding to a virtual campus. All of which will ensure that our campus is modern, efficient, and stimulating learning and working within this environment so that we can sustain the excellence of our academic staff and our support staff with a view to meeting the needs of future learning and future students. The chair mentioned my background is a technology teacher, and I'm still heavily involved in educational research in the area of design and technology education. And one of the primary objectives is that we serve our young people. And I think one of the challenges is that today's children are preparing for work that we as adults haven't fully conceived. I'm not sure we fully comprehend what the workforce will look like in the future. And the new roles being created by many industries really challenge the job prospects and the position of capability for our sons and daughters and our future students. There is an estimate that the jobs of the future do not yet fully exist, and there's certainly recognition that 10 years ago, many of the jobs that currently exist were either in their infancy or not yet conceived. We can't predict industry and the job market, but what we can do as educators is we can work towards making that transition easier for future professionals by relying on the improvement of the learning environment, the methods, tools, and challenges that we can address within the education space. One aspect of that, and I can see that it's also addressed in your program, that we need to have a serious discussion around is the recognition and the appropriate accreditations of new learnings, particularly the rise in micro-credentials and digital badging, which is spoken about in your conference proceedings. And this allows our students to achieve their goals whenever, wherever, and however they choose. They allow students to feel in control of their learning, and it allows students to build bespoke suites of personally relevant qualifications to meet industry needs, but also to be relevant to future employers. They allow learners to advance their skills and knowledge and will revolutionize the way we think about upskilling and continuous education for all. Specifically, I want to emphasize their commitment here to pedagogical innovation and encourage you to stay challenging the assumptions and conceiving new methodologies for the benefit of our young learners. I'm proud to say that we too are at the forefront of research within this pedagogical space, and only a matter of weeks ago we launched Project Talent, which is an Erasmus Plus EU-funded project that combines academics from higher education with post-primary teachers across Ireland, the UK, Spain, and the Netherlands. And the focus of that is to adopt team-based learning as a way of developing critical, collaborative decision-making and problem-solving. The project, led at AIT by Nuala Harding, our Head of Teaching and Learning, is providing educators with resources essential to developing students' critical skills and collaborative capabilities. And 4 of our Athlone-based feeder schools, Athlone Community College, Coláiste Ciarán, Our Lady's Bower, and Mars Secondary School, will all avail of the innovative upskilling with the facilitation that this education will bring to the teachers in their respective school communities. In addition, AIT hosts the Technology Education Research Group, acronym TERG, which was mentioned in the Chair's address this morning. This group is internationally active in research areas such as enacted practice, spatial cognition, spatial skills, embedded cognition, and holistic assessment strategies, all areas that are transversal and important for the new generation of capabilities that we will be forced to try and assess, recognise, and progress. Recently, the TERG group have linked with Timex under the leadership of Dr. Niall Murray to establish a research agenda looking at educational and pedagogical benefits of augmented and virtual reality as they apply to the context of learning gain. This is an exciting venture that we hope will have significant impact on future teaching and learning. So, as we lead the agenda together, I'm reminded of the words of Brian Herbert, who once said, "The capacity to learn is a gift, the ability to learn is a skill, and the willingness to learn is a choice." Today, the willingness from this community is apparent, and I commend your endeavours to improve education for our learners and improve education in Ireland for generations to come. I would like to close out now and wish you a wonderful day and remind you that our doors as a higher education institute, both to your schools, your students, and yourselves as educators, is always open. Cornelia Connolly.
I'd just like to say a very big thank you to Niall for giving his time and a wonderful overview of AIT as it stands at the moment. And I think we're all, what should I say, noted that he was very much concerned, and AIT is very much concerned about the pedagogy, the skills. 50 million for hardware or 100 million or whatever the figure is grand, but it really has no meaning unless it's contextualised within the pedagogy and what happens within our classrooms, and that teachers are the critical part of that. So thank you very, very much, Dr. Niall Seary. Without further ado then, I'm going to move ahead to our keynote speaker. Cornelia is known to many of you. She is working in NUIG, very much involved in pre-service teaching, very much involved and committed to the T in STEM, I think is the way she describes herself on a number of occasions. So again, it's not for me to take over her time, so without, again, further ado, I'll introduce Cornelia to you. Thank you.
Okay, gur míl maithagat Adrienne asachtan curú ar dúspóra agus an fáilte. Thank you very much for the invitation to speak today. I suppose, you know, as Keynote, one's always daunted, oh my gosh, what am I going to speak about? But yeah, the theme today, our evolving learning landscape, really gives one great scope. We see that as evidenced in the agenda, as Adrienne and as Niall has mentioned, there's such diversity that come to the CESI Con, and we see coding in primary schools, the introduction of computer science at post-primary, policy adoption, and a variety of initiatives being presented today. So we certainly have that evolving learning landscape evidenced today. A number of years ago, many moons ago, I guess, I worked in IT and management consulting, and I remember in training in Chicago, we were kind of introduced, to business and systems design and development. And one of the key components at the start is to think in business analysis, you look at the as is before you predict the to be. So I'm going to take that kind of approach today and look at the as is and kind of the historic or perspective on CESI. And just to remember that CESI stands for Computers in Education Society of Ireland. So the remit and scope of CESI is quite large. And when we think about it, I think, it was born in 1973, that, as was mentioned earlier, so it's 47 years old. And if we put that in context, that CESI originated at an era of significant change in Irish education. If we think in 1966, free second level education was introduced by Donogh O'Malley and the Lemass government. In 1965, there was a groundbreaking report on the investment in education. And it was only at that point that Irish governments connected education and economic development of the country and of the citizens. And really, that report was informed by the concept of education as a means by which we invested in the next generation. And so in 1973, when CESI was born, the main aims at that point was around training facilities for teachers and the introduction of computer studies as a post-primary individual subject. So if we look at today and the Irish, the continuum, the Irish curriculum, we see how computing and technology is embedded from Ashtere in primary, junior cycle and senior cycle. And I inserted the key competencies of the draft primary curriculum that was introduced just this week by the NCCA. And we see that one of the key competencies is being a digital learner. So at primary education, our curriculum is ensuring that each student attending primary school is going to be a digital learner. And that interconnection and that flow through to second level is and should be evident and will be. The second aim of CESI was in the introduction of computer studies as a post-primary subject. And so we know and we have computer science as an individual subject now. And those 40 teachers, the pioneering teachers, and some of which are here today, are really championing that. So in terms of the evolving learning landscape, the two aims of CESI in its origins, have they been fulfilled or are they being fulfilled? And maybe that conversation is ongoing. I think the aims, the subject has been introduced, training facilities are improving, but there's still an ongoing conversation, and those aims are still, I think, very much alive. But there's also additional challenges deserving of our attention. And we know that there's a strong correlation between education and digital education and knowledge and skills. And so that conversation, I think, we need to ignite. And I'm going to introduce, I guess, some topics around that today. There's also a connect between policy, pedagogy, and technology. And again, to put it into context, some international and national contexts that kind of position this space and our conversations. And looking at some of the international policies, we've the OECD first in terms of innovating education and education for innovation in 2016. And it really was about the impact of digital technologies on teaching and learning. The DEAP then is an EU policy which introduces 11 different factors about digital competencies. Education and Training 2020 framework is concerned with the lifelong learning trajectory and the connect between formal and informal learning. And then we have our own national policies in this space, the digital strategy, our education action plans, the STEM strategy as well, and not forgetting our digital learning framework that really positions and provides a structure for teachers and students on that journey. So these are some of the policies, I think, that dictate and govern the trajectory and roadmap that we are on. So my learning intention, like a good teacher, I'm going to state my learning intention of our talk is really to reflect upon our evolving learning landscape through a critical but positive lens. And I hope that maybe I ignite some questions. As Adrienne kind of introduced, I suppose my space and passion is around pre-service teaching, but this, because we have such a diverse audience at CESI, I'm really opening up the floor here and hopefully igniting a conversation and posing questions. There is interesting ontological tension between models of education that computer science and the code it uses versus the models of education that educators and teacher educators hold dear. And having both hats on and straddling both conversations, I hope to introduce some topics and discuss that today. So I'm going to look at, or just touch on, diversity in computing, data and AI, partnerships and collaborations, and then conclude talking about some limits of technology. So firstly, in terms of diversity of computing, so the inclusion and exclusion of computing and technology. Diversity is a fact of nature and of society, but it's a fact and it's a concept that's sometimes ignored by computing and the computing industry. And computing and automation works great for average, typical cases, but diversity guarantees that non-normality. And are we and are our students always concerned with that? Whether it's deterministic algorithms or data-driven probabilistic reasoning, software struggles with diversity. And those individuals who are well-resourced, who have strong educational backgrounds, are likely to benefit most from computing and digital education. And as Adrienne mentioned, and even Niall earlier too, to date, policy fix is generally around providing access to hardware and to devices at homes and at schools. But this can also be problematic, and it can be problematic on two fronts. Firstly, it encourages the focus on those individuals who are isolated. It reinforces the problem status in society and the inequalities in social structures. These responses view technology as a good thing, as the solution, again ignoring the socioeconomic societal challenges and the aspects of technology, the strong neoliberal ideology that drives much of what is developed for education. So solutions that offer access and skills are likely to remain an easy fix for policymakers. So instead, as educators, should we spearhead a change of approach? Access doesn't guarantee participation, and that's evidenced in even the uptake of computer science as a subject in the UK, for example. Researchers and educators need to better theorize the links between education, developments in technology, and inequality. And we also have to strive to actively, design technologies that facilitate a more equitable future for everyone. I think it's also important to highlight generally the discourse around diversity in computing really is often around gender in computing, but diversity in computing has many other facets and elements that we need to be considerate of. So this is not a mirror, first and foremost, but the learning intention was to reflect on our evolving learning landscape. So how do you, in your class, in your school or situation, how do you accommodate diversity or consider it? This is going to be interactive. Hey, my second point is around data and AI and the implications for education. So machines, technology, computers, it gathers our data from our shopping to our political affiliations, and AI is hungry for data. And we're all aware that data can be biased. It's about the past. It also is what makes computing powerful and valuable, but also harmful. And also, AI will increasingly become an engine for education and student data the fuel. So as educators, we need to pay close attention to the platform providers and to the ecosystem that we're reliant on, that's using our student data and that we work within. So questions in this regard, like, will education platforms act as large data brokers to advanced AI backends? Will the data providers be bought up? Will it lead to classrooms on platforms or platforms in classrooms? We also need to consider the effect of datafication and fundamentally, like, on the gathering of data and how that's influencing our learning, which leads into the whole idea of machine learning. The implications of increasing datafication of education raises significant questions about the models of behavior that we learn as humans from machines and how that's affecting our classroom. I guess we need to question how much of this salient machine learning is having on our education system and how much of that is undertaken by the humans. So some questions. Where is the most significant influential learning happening in society now? What kinds of systems are undertaking the learning? And how is our learning as humans, as citizens, as educators, and the learning of our students, how is that intermingled in the ways that machines learn? These questions extend the idea of formal education. And it also kind of highlights the extent to which we need to be cognizant and expand our horizons somewhat. Supoff writes about the division of labor and the division of learning, and really questions, I suppose, the distribution of knowledge and whether one is included or excluded in learning and the opportunity to learn. Questions also about which people, institutions, processes, and have the authority to determine what is included in learning, that they're able to learn, and also that they're able to act on their knowledge. So again, as educators, we perhaps need to work to re-establish the value of formal education in an era of ubiquitous learning by machines using our data. We perhaps need to challenge the accepted view of what constitutes meaningful and worthwhile knowledge for our students and for future society. My third topic of reflection is around partnerships and collaborations, and I guess questioning who's driving the agenda. There's a commercial ecosystem in education and very much evident in educational technology specifically. But again, we need to pay close attention to the educational platforms and providers and what's occurring in our ecosystem and in the infrastructure. The global digital education agenda will continue to influence and be influenced by large corporations, philanthropic interests, publishers, etc. And alongside that, we have growing markets in China and India. And how do all these corporate actors influence the learning that's taking place in our classes, in our schools, in our environment? There's nothing wrong or new with these contributions and with commercial contributions, but I think we do need to ask questions about regulation and oversight activities within our education setting. Some software development companies value efficiency, value convenience, neutrality, competition, but equally so within education, we have to also be conscious and conscious of humanity, sustainability, equality. So should large corporations continue to exercise soft power in influencing and shaping education decision-making, while at the same time profiting from decisions being made? How might we better ensure that commercial actors support public education rather than working to create demand for their products? How might educators be supported in maintaining their role in guiding and leading development of digital education to our youngest and most vulnerable in society? Are there counter-narratives that could be developed against the behaviours which are promoted in the development of data-driven personalised learning systems, for example? How do companies support or influence your classroom or your school, directly or indirectly? My fourth topic of reflection is concerned with the limits of technology. Computing, as we're all aware, is very powerful, but we also have to remember that it can't solve every problem, that it's often wrong, that it's not neutral, and it's certainly not free. When we think about it, computing is premised on industrial society's default worldview of ongoing economic growth that's both desirable and achievable. But this growth-focused worldview is at odds with other scientific communities in terms of ecological and social reasons and challenges that we contribute to, and that we have to find solutions for. So, computing underlies virtually all of the infrastructure in global society, and therefore it's critical in actually finding the solution, and that we adapt to the global limits. There's a movement by Nardi in terms of computing within limits, where we're really conscious about working in a constrained environment, that we're conscious of climate, that we're conscious of social issues, and that we kind of, I suppose, teach that within our computing environments. Because teaching programming doesn't always teach this. In fact, sometimes learning to code, we adapt the attitude that technology can solve everything, that computing is only technical, that it's not social, that we're concerned with algorithms and not data. So, and that we're concerned, with error handling and not social justice. So incorporating all of these values, I think we have to really concern ourselves with computing within limits. So how do we, in computing education, study and teach all of these things in a way that transfers to everyday decisions in life and in work? So I've talked about diversity in computing, data and AI, partnerships, collaborations, and also some of the limits. And it's fine highlighting some of the challenges that we have, but what are the solutions, or what can we as educators do to address this? So I think we need to actively design technologies that facilitate and that we're conscious of an equitable future for everyone. That we work to re-establish the value of formal education in an era of ubiquitous learning by machines using our data. That we're supported, that we as educators are supported in maintaining our role in guiding and in leading the global education agenda. And that we also explore other forms of computing within limits that consider the global ecological and material limits that we're all faced and facing. Also, in terms of steps forward, when we think of computing is driving automation, are we promising technological answers to some of the challenges? Are we amplifying disinformation on social media? Is our field, are we ignoring some of the big problems that we actually are uniquely positioned to answer and to come up with solutions for? And how do the values of CESI and the computing education community in Ireland and digital education community, how do we reinforce, amplify, or contribute to the solutions? So maybe when we're implementing education or education devices or software within schools, maybe we need to think about our core values and the assumptions we're making about the learning and the learners. And so how do we embody these core values and how do we embed them? What are the assumptions about pedagogy? And what are the models of pedagogy that we aim to promote? How do the technologies contribute to the education of the child in our classroom that enables them to be a productive citizen leaving our education system to engage in a democratic and civilized society? Aligned with that, society needs to rapidly recognise that if and when new technologies are causing harm, that we actually stop the innovation in its tracks. But in order to do that, we have to question, we have to research, and really critically reflect on the technology and the implications at the same pace as the technology is emerging. And that's difficult for educators. But it's something we have to kind of get up to speed, and it's a challenge that we have to engage with. Neil Selwyn talks about that we need care rather than competition, cooperation rather than rivalry, and imagination rather than corporized creativity. And the computing education community are in a position to change a lot. We can discover new ways to teach, and we can encourage the role and promote the role of computing and ensure that everybody is competent in digital education going forward. So thinking back, my aim and my learning intention was to reflect on our evolving learning landscape through a critical but positive lens. And I hope I posed some questions and I started, or that you can start a conversation today around some of the societal implications of computing education, the strengths, but also the areas of improvement that we can incorporate in our practice. We need to stay curious, we need to research, we need to be active in problem posing as well as problem solving. And today I think we have that opportunity to really reflect, to have conversations, and to question. Gura míle maith agaibh.
Wow, I think any of those questions could keep us occupied for quite a period of time. Cornelia, are you happy to take a few questions? We have time for about 3 questions, I'd say, if anybody wants to lead off the floor. Everybody being very shy. I have to say that I myself feel quite challenged, having been a long time in education and kind of at the very early stages of technology, that technology has gone at that rate. My classroom, my teaching has sought to adopt, but perhaps not as critically as you have said that we should do, and that the whole idea of technology being within society and of society, and that it doesn't handle diversity very well, and all of us know that that's what we are supposed to be doing. And it strikes me, and I just wonder that as teachers, we don't really get an opportunity at times to say, what is it we do? What are the values of it? Is there a forum that we can be a body that says we're part of the discussion, not as an individual teacher, but as educators, that we have a unique thing? Because sometimes you feel you're being a bit pushed out, that there's the book on this, oh sure, we can just go and look that up. But teachers do a lot more that's kind of intangible in some ways. Have you any ideas how we can actually be part of that discussion, not as individual teachers, but as at that table with industry?
But I think that's why the CESI community and subject associations, I think, are really important, isn't it? And it's the community voice. But it is engaging.
Sorry, can you use the microphone?
Sorry.
There's a handheld on the table there.
Handheld on the table.
Oh, here.
Right in front of you. There you go.
Okay.
Wireless mic there.
Thanks.
Thanks, Corn.
Oh, yeah. Now I feel as if I'm singing. Okay. Yeah, but I think in answering your question, Adrienne, it's about being involved in communities like CESI, subject associations, but it's all about the conversation, isn't it? It's the ecosystem. We're reliant on industry, and that it's very good and it's complementary. We're also our teachers are also, teaching a curriculum and teaching exams, and we've all those things to consider. But it's considering everything, and it's keeping the conversation ongoing and in practice. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I mean, it's.
But I think. Oh, sorry.
I always think it's kind of difficult. Teachers are so busy down at the board face or whatever you like to call it, working on the stuff, that I've had the opportunity of, I've kind of retired from the classroom, I've had the opportunity to attend meetings with the department and with various agencies, and what strikes me most is that the teachers are not always present at the conversations that actually most impact on what they do in the class, because they're busy doing what they should be doing, because that's 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. And here are all of you here on a Saturday, and people with us on a Friday. And I just wonder, is there an opportunity for a teacher voice that's still very much practitioner-led to be in those conversations? I know people get seconded and they can join things, but they're small in numbers really relative to the population of teachers.
Yeah, but even like teachers in practice conducting research in their classes, kind of like, again, the pace at which technology is evolving, we as teachers and practitioners need to be researching at the same pace, if that's possible, to see what's harmful or what's advantageous to our classes and to our students. Yeah, there's a lot to contend with and a lot of balls in the air at the same time, but kind of engaging and keeping the conversation and keeping abreast of technology and developments and policy is very important.
Would anybody like to come in here?
Yeah, can I just say, so one thing I feel is missing.
Sorry, it's just we're streaming, so
Sorry. Okay. No, one thing I feel that's missing is often models. We're missing models in education. And if I look at something like system life cycle models, or if I look at product life cycle models, or if I look at instructional design life cycle models, I see sort of analysis, design, development, implementation, development, and sometimes I think we don't give enough time to some of these using similar models. So the first stage being analysis. So what are we doing? What are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? Where do we want to get to? And I suppose the mention of the different things that come to mind after the presentation. One is the idea of technology maybe not being there for diversity, but I kind of very much disagree with that. I think that technology can be used more effectively for diversity than anything else. For people in different third world countries, people from poorer communities, but also for people outside of the classroom. So the technology is there. But for me, one of the important things that I find that we use in business, that we use well, maybe in business, but we don't seem to use so much in education, and that can also be used on an individual level, is analyzing what we're doing. What are the problems? What do we want to do better? The planning around that, and on the school level, or on a state level, then the budget around that as well, because that has also been considered. So I would love to see a lot more of models being introduced into education, and those type of models.
Yeah, I suppose, like, you know, at the end of the day, education doesn't move as quickly as industry, doesn't it not? And they're two different systems. So you're trying, and particularly within digital education or computer science education, you're contending with a lot of different variables that are working at different paces. We can only do our best. I think we have to be conscious of an awful lot. I agree with your point around diversity and technology. I think sometimes some of my questions are actually probing, or have we thought of all of these things, or that's what I want to do. It does increase, it opens up opportunities for a lot of people, but sometimes too it highlights issues and problems that we didn't consider always too. So there's numerous instances of that, and I suppose that's what the research, and that's what we have to research more as well. The challenges in that space. But equally so, it's very interesting too, is there's an inequality issue in terms of if a company is beside my school's going to get funded, whereas if I'm in Ballygo Backwards, do I get that same funding, or does my child get that same support? So there's loads of issues, and that's why, I don't know, it's an area of discussion, but should there be regulation? Should there be equality for all schools in public education fundamentally for support in that regard? It's a question.
We've been busy with our data protection, our GDPR policy at the moment. And you were talking about, you know, a lot of the schools now, we're employing companies to manage student data. And, you know, we've had a lot of discussion in the school about what we should put up online, because you're creating a digital footprint for that child.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose, you know, how do we manage that ownership of the data once it goes up on a third-party system is kind of...
Yeah, and then what happens when that third party gets bought over, for example? You know, so there's a lot that, you know, are we conscious of, and do we understand the implications? It's...
How much confidentiality do you put up there?
Yeah. And if it's if the company is bought over, if it's sent on, exactly. There's lots of implications or questions that we kind of have to be conscious of. I think that we, as a subject teacher or a principal or school leader, you know, that's not my expertise, perhaps, you know, too. So,
At this point in time, in order to keep us on schedule, I think I'd ask you to put your hands together and say many, many thanks to Cornelia. I suspect that those questions will be rocking around the CESI mailing list for a little bit of time, and perhaps we could look at them in more detail and maybe a slightly different forum going forward over the next year or so, because I think all of them are extremely pertinent. Now, a few housekeeping details, please. If you would just have a quick look at your schedule, your programme for today. For those of you who are not familiar, all the IT rooms are to the left as you go out of the Douglas Hyde. The other B rooms are you go back to the entrance where you came in and turn right, and then it's down a corridor. Am I right in that, Katie? One or two things, there are changes to our programme, just bear with me for a moment. If you look at the 12 o'clock session with Tony Riley, due to unforeseen circumstances, Tony is unable to be with us, so that has had to be taken off the programme completely. So that's B57 at 12 o'clock. If you go across to B58, you might be wondering why it's there in red. It's in red just to highlight the fact that you're no longer in IT3. If you look at it column-wise, you might presume that it is the same place. If you come down to 12:30 then, and here we will have the panel discussion in this room. Immediately outside the Douglas Hyde and to the left will be the space for the dance. And the exhibition, posters and Twitter competition will be out in the area where where all the displays are at the moment, just out to your right. Now, what I would ask too is that during the day, if you tweet out any exciting things that you find, please. There are communities of people who, for one reason or another, couldn't join us today and who are watching that tweet and are anxious to see what's going on because they feel very deprived not being here with us. So without further ado, thank you very much. Enjoy your day, and the chats will be wonderful. 11 o'clock for coffee, just in case you're wondering. Thank you.